In the vast expanse of the Old West, a rare kind of outlaw emerged. Amid stories of gunmen and bandits, some women broke through the fence of convention and left their own mark. Precise strikes, clever escapes, and names that still echo today. In today's video, we're going to blaze those trails and follow the journeys of 10 figures who became legends. And the adventure is just getting started. Get ready to discover what almost got left out of the history books. Pearl Hart, end of the 19th century. The dusty roads of Arizona were still crossed by stagecoaches, and the law moved slowly. They carried money and letters. At every turn, there was the risk of a gun. It's in this setting that Pearl Hart appears, nicknamed the Bandit Queen of Arizona. Not because of legend, but because of a calculated move. In May of 1899, pressed by the need to support her child, she teamed up with Joe Boot and chose the route between Globe and Florence. Disguised as a man, she carried out the robbery. It lasted only minutes. Short commands, bags collected, looks that would never be forgotten. She took $418 but set aside $1 for each passenger so they could eat when they arrived, a detail that stuck in people's minds. The chase, however, didn't last long. Caught, Boot got 30 years. Pearl got 7 for taking the driver's revolver. In prison, the unexpected happened. She escaped with the help of friendly guards, was recaptured, and sometime later turned up pregnant. The scandal made headlines and helped pave the way for a pardon from the governor in 1902. From there, the trail gets blurry. Sources disagree, the path narrows. Some swear they saw her on stage, turning into an attraction. Others say she chose to disappear with farmer Calvin Bywater, trying to live a quiet life. Between legend and record, Pearl still raises questions and sets the stage for the next scene. Eleanor Dumont. During the gold rush, when San Francisco smelled of fresh wood and promise, a young woman from New Orleans reached 21 with something rare in the West: calm in the face of risk. Eleanor Dumont got herself a table at the Bella Union Saloon and, with a steady hand on the cards, drew in onlookers, miners, and merchants. She wasn't just quick with numbers. She could read silences, measure heartbeats, and turn chance into a show. But fame brings suspicion. Accused of cheating without proof, she left town and sought another path. In Nevada City, she kept her discipline and tight smile. Prospectors lined up to lose or win under her watch. In Carson City, the reckoning came. Involved with Jack McKnight, she learned too late about the scam. He sold off her possessions, vanished with the money, and left her with nothing. Eleanor responded like someone who knew how to manage risk, now off the gaming table, and put an end to the trader's life. After that, her shine turned to shadow. She got the nickname that would follow her, Madame Mustache, for the faint shading on her upper lip. Luck grew scarce, debts piled up, and in 1879, surrounded by loss, she mixed wine with morphine. Between smoky saloons and dusty towns, her story shows a West that rewarded boldness and made you pay dearly for it. And as her chips dwindled, many swore they could see in the deck one last comeback, a promise that kept eyes on the table, waiting for the next hand. Lillian Frances Smith. At the end of the 19th century, while the myth of the West filled traveling arenas, a teenage girl stepped in to challenge the script. Lillian Frances Smith had perfect aim and steady nerves, but her story isn't just about hitting targets. It's about claiming a space she was told didn't belong to her. At 14, she joined Buffalo Bill's Wild West show and took on the persona of Winona, introduced as a Native American princess. It was a role designed to captivate audiences and reinforce legends, but within it, Lillian pushed boundaries. In the same arena shone Annie Oakley, quiet and already celebrated. The comparison was inevitable. Lillian didn't try to fit the mold. She spoke loudly, provoked, and showed confidence in a world used to restrained women. The rivalry sparked curiosity from journalists and fans, and according to many accounts, helped push her out of the cast. Leaving didn't mean stepping back. Lillian kept traveling from town to town, adjusting her acts, switching troops, insisting on existing as a professional sharpshooter when there was barely any space for it. When she died in 1930, she was buried in Sioux clothing, a final gesture that sums up the ambiguities of her life, between show and identity, marketing and belonging. And it's right in that in-between that her figure still calls to us. Rose Dunn. At the end of the 19th century, when the Oklahoma Territory was still a place of frontiers and disputes, Rose Dunn emerged. Raised in a family with a shady reputation, she learned early on how to move among gambling tables, quick messages, and hard stares. Through her brothers, she met the men the press called the Dalton Gang. Among them was George Bitter Creek Newcomb. He spoke with a confidence that could silence a saloon. Rose, watchful, drew closer. From then on, passion and loyalty walked with her. It was Newcomb who gave her the nickname that would make her famous, Rose of Cimarron. The episode that would make her a legend came in 1893. In the middle of a shootout that shut down the street, Rose saw Newcomb cornered. Without waiting for orders, she crossed through the hail of bullets, handed him a rifle, and cleared a path for his escape. The scene spread from mouth to mouth, blurring fact and gunpowder. 2 years later, the story flipped. Her own brothers turned Newcomb over to the authorities. The capture ended in his death, and the love story broke there between warrants and bounties. Rose stepped away from the cycle that had trapped her. Far from the chases, she married an Oklahoma politician and settled into a routine, a fixed address, and another kind of commitment. Her path, once shaped by life outside the law, was realigned by new ties and settings. And still, when people talk about the Old West, Rose's name comes back. The image of that crossing under fire remains a hook for one question. What makes someone decide in seconds which side of history they'll stand on? Kate Horany. Mary Catherine Horany, best remembered as Kate, Miss Doc Holliday, had a life that went far beyond a supporting role. Born in Hungary around 1850, she grew up in a Europe on edge. Her father served as a surgeon to Emperor Maximilian, part of a short-lived monarchy experiment in Mexico. When the regime collapsed in 1867, the family crossed the ocean and sought refuge in Iowa in the American Midwest. The move didn't bring peace. Orphaned by the loss of both parents, Kate would later lose her husband and child to yellow fever, a disease that haunted southern ports and trade routes. Caught between grief and necessity, she chose the frontier. Dodge City, a crossroads of cattle, railroads, and gambling halls, offered both risk and opportunity, the kind of place where lives could be reinvented. In 1875 there, she met Wyatt Earp, and through him, John Henry Doc Holliday, a dentist who made his living at the card table. That was the start of an intense partnership. Kate's loyalty soon became her signature. According to accounts, when Holliday was jailed after a gambling table dispute turned violent, she pulled off an unlikely rescue. She set fire to a shed to draw the street's attention, marched to the jail, and firmly demanded her partner's release. It worked. It wasn't a romantic gesture. It was a sharp read of an environment where distraction and boldness could be worth more than money. The story spread among chroniclers of the West, cementing the image of a woman who made her own choices and paid the price. With the silver boom, the couple headed to Tombstone, a city boiling with quick money, local politics, and rival gangs. There, tensions mounted until they erupted in the gunfight at the OK Corral in 1881, an event that shaped the legacy of the Earps and Holliday. On the eve of new clashes, worried for Kate's safety, Doc insisted she leave town. It was a protective move, but also a turning point. Once apart, they began a slow separation that would eventually reshape their shared history. Decades later, far from the noise of gunfire and gambling halls, Mary Catherine found refuge at the Arizona Pioneer Home. She lived to the age of 89, an unlikely longevity for someone who had survived epidemics and the chaos of the frontier. Her life bridged 19th century Europe in the American desert, a reminder that behind famous episodes were ordinary people making hard decisions. And it's right between the spark that lit the shed and the dust of Tombstone that the next scene begins to take shape. Etta Place. At the turn of the century, when the Wild West was giving way to the cities, one name showed up in both saloons and detective reports: Etta Place. The press called her the Queen of Outlaws, but the records place her alongside two men already on their way to becoming legends: Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. Her trail first appears in San Antonio, in a brothel frequented by cattlemen. From there on, almost everything is shadow. Few facts, many versions. To place Etta in context, it's worth looking at the setting. Railroads were cutting across territories, banks were building vaults, and the Pinkerton Agency was expanding the hunt. On this board, Robert Leroy Parker, Butch, and Harry Longabaugh, the Sundance Kid, planned robberies with precision. Etta wasn't a bystander. On the eve of the heists, she picked out the horses and mapped the trails. In the dust of the getaways, she swapped mounts at the right moment, threw off pursuers, and when needed, guarded the take alone, holding steady until sunrise. Her origins remain a knot. Some claim Etta and Ann Bassett were the same woman, a theory supported by coincidences in dates and physical descriptions. The lack of conclusive proof keeps the mystery alive and explains part of her enduring allure. As the noose tightened, the trio moved to South America. In Argentina, Etta resurfaced among cold valleys and long frontiers, bringing with her the choreography of Old West robberies. She took part in a bank heist and kept moving. The road ended in Bolivia for her companions, in a clash with local troops that tradition remembers as the end of Butch and Sundance. And Etta? The trail vanishes. Did she fall in the same ambush with no witnesses, or did she wipe her past clean and return to life on the northern plains under another name? The next step in this story may be hidden somewhere between two versions, and a silence that refuses to break. Pearl Devere. Picture the West still being built, railroads pushing forward, mines opening overnight, little law and lots of hurry. In that environment, businesses offering conversation, protection, and company found fertile ground. That's where Pearl Devere comes in. Born in Chicago and raised in Indiana, she followed the movement west in the late 1870s, looking for income and independence. She chose the adult entertainment trade, a practical part of daily life in those fast-growing towns. In Denver, she took the name Mrs. Isabel Martin to buy herself discretion and freedom. It worked. While the silver economy boomed, she set schedules, handpicked her clientele, and kept her books balanced. The crash of 1893, however, broke that world apart. Mines shut down, wages disappeared, and spending dried up. Like so many others, Pearl moved on to another town. Her destination was Cripple Creek, hot with the gold rush. In the city's Bohemian district, she opened a house that offered more than luxury. It offered order. She set boundaries with patrons, established safety protocols, looked after her workers' health, and split profits by clear rules. By treating her staff as partners, she reduced violence and drew in a clientele willing to pay for predictability. To her family, she kept the story that she was a seamstress, a shield against judgment from afar. In 1895, aiming to solidify her respectability, she married industrialist C.B. Flynn. It looked like a step up, until a fire destroyed both her brothel and his factory. The marriage collapsed. Flynn left for Mexico and Pearl stayed. She started over with the old homestead, and party by party she brought life back to her business and the local economy. By June 1897, her receptions were the talk of the town. After one of those nights, the insomnia wouldn't let go. Pearl turned to laudanum, a common painkiller of the time, a mix of opium and alcohol. By morning, she was found dead in her room. And so the question that drives this story remains. What does her life reveal about the machinery that kept the Old West running, and about the women who kept it turning? Laura Bullion. At the turn of the 20th century, when the railroads were stitching the West together and the law was still learning how to catch up, Laura Bullion appeared. The daughter of outlaw Henry Bullion, she got into the trade early. At 13, she teamed up with Ben Kilpatrick, the tall Texan, and William Carver, key figures in the gang that ran with Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. Among her companions, she earned the nickname Rose of the Wild Bunch. She wasn't a side player. She forged signatures, handled logistics, and helped keep the robbery machine running. In July 1901, she took part in the Great Northern Train robbery, a hit that brought in about $60,000, a sum that lit up headlines and drew a swarm of pursuers. The tide turned soon after, when she was caught with $8,500 in counterfeit bills. Convicted, she served 2.5 years in prison. After her release, she stepped away from crime and lived a quiet life, spending her final years in Memphis. She died on December 2, 1961, of natural causes. The trail she left behind, however, still points to where the story goes next. Sally Skull. Sally Skull entered Old West lore as a figure made of dust, gunpowder, and rumor. Sally Newman, her birth name, was born in 1817 in Illinois, in a country pushing its frontiers westward. Her family followed that current, and as a young girl she learned that the frontier wasn't just a landscape. It was a hard set of rules. At 6 years old, their cabin was invaded by a stranger. Her mother, not waiting for help, reacted like someone who knew hesitation could cost dearly. She sliced off the intruder's fingers as he tried to force the window. The lesson stuck: constant vigilance and quick decisions. As a teenager, when a warning swept through the neighborhood, Sally saw a man hesitate. "Hand me your gun," she said flat. "If you won't go, I will." It wasn't theater. In a world of improvised militias, shaky treaties, and disputes over water and cattle, authority often came from the fastest move. That code, direct, sometimes ruthless, became her trademark, following her through trails and growing settlements. In 1833, she married Jesse Robinson, known for his bravery in local conflicts with indigenous groups. Meanwhile, settlements thickened and dirt roads opened new trade routes. The marriage lasted about 10 years, marked by the absences and sudden reunions typical of a region fueled by uncertainty. When it ended, Sally didn't stop. She moved between trading posts and camps, striking deals and changing course as quickly as the map shifted. New partnerships came along. 3 names then entered the story: George Skull, John Doyle, and Isaiah Watkins. All died young, each under unclear circumstances. In a society that relied on travel accounts and letters that took weeks to arrive, doubts quickly hardened into certainties. Some said Sally was bad luck. Others whispered she had a heavy hand. The fact was, as fences spread and makeshift towns gained streets, Sally's figure grew, more legend than person. By the campfires, her story turned into a warning. "Behave or Sally Skull will come get you," parents whispered to sleepless children. The message painted 2 images: the survivor where so many had fallen, and the shadow that loomed over husbands, partners, and enemies. In that uneven mirror, the frontier projected its fears: disputed inheritances, domestic violence, frontier justice, onto the silhouette of a single woman. Over time, versions of her end multiplied. The most repeated claims: her last husband, blinded by greed, betrayed Sally and killed her to take her property. The rumor spread from ranch to ranch and, like many myths, stuck through repetition, not proof. And so Sally remained suspended between 2 records: a victim of the brutality she had learned to wield, and an agent of a social code that demanded toughness. It's in that space where fact and rumor blur that her story still calls for listening, and where a few clues hint at new chapters. Sadie Marcus, a name that cuts through the dust of the Old West and comes back every time we talk about bold choices. As a young girl, she heard the call of the road and at 17, traded a tidy home for a traveling theater company. These troops made their way through mining towns and military posts, bringing music and quick scenes to audiences hungry for something new. On stage, Sadie learned how to own the spotlight: a steady voice, deliberate steps, and attention to the crowd, and above all, to her own future. Years later, she went against her family's advice. She followed her heart to Tombstone, Arizona, a feverish outpost built on silver, rumors, and guns. There, she grew close to Johnny Bean, a well-known figure at the gambling tables and dances, whose love life kept the saloon talk going. The relationship sparked, but had little stability. Even so, it was in Tombstone that Sadie's story took a new turn. In this setting of narrow streets, feuding newspapers, and local rivalries came Wyatt Earp. Known for moving between the law and the gambling table, Earp carried a reputation forged in places where order was fragile. Meeting Sadie challenged etiquette and expectations. They recognized each other through a kind of practical kinship. Both knew how to live in uncertain territory, where survival meant reading the signs and having the courage to change course. Sadie wasn't a bystander. Her presence grounded a man who lived for open horizons. While Wyatt chased opportunities, new towns, new ventures, new beginnings, she built continuity, maintaining contacts, organizing routines, and securing safe spaces. Their partnership crossed deserts and ports, weathering the bumps of the era and staying together until Earp's final days in 1929. Following her path, we see more than Wyatt's companion. We see a woman who made her own choices, broke conventions, and wrote, line by line, her own version of the West. And as we move forward, more layers unfold. What did it mean to be an actress on the frontier? How do you reinvent yourself when the town changes, fortune shifts, and public memory prefers lone heroes? Sadie's story asks those questions, and the road keeps going.